Triple H has responded to the ratings war against AEW. I find his comments very interesting. We're going to break it all down right here, right now, on Destination Pro Wrestling.
You have arrived at your destination.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Ango. Thank you so much for stopping by. All of the new faces. Oh my gosh, so many new subscribers. You guys are incredible. We're bringing you some more pro wrestling news. Triple H is not worried about AEW, but I'm slightly concerned about his comments about AEW. We're going to talk about these comments and the long-term effect of what he is actually saying. Guys, we're talking about it right here on Destination Pro Wrestling. So as always, you know the drill. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button and ring the bell. This way you could get notified literally on all of the content that gets uploaded onto this channel. And it's going to be very appreciated because you guys know sometimes YouTube just doesn't push out, subscription feeds and all that good stuff. So follow me on Twitter at Tango with Ango, ring the bell. Hopefully YouTube lets you know when new videos go up. If not, just click on the channel. You guys should know every single day we're going to have pro wrestling news all the time. And let's talk about Triple H. So Triple H actually had an interview with Sports Illustrated, and if you guys don't remember, I'm going to kind of bring you back up to speed. When AEW defeated Triple H and the NXT brand with the ratings on the episode, Triple H congratulated AEW, and quite honestly, a lot of people took that as a sign of weakness. And today, he continues with the same ideology. In an interview with Sports Illustrated, Triple H goes on to say, "I am a believer in the long-term game. You create the right product, and over time, people will find it. I think back to Monday nights years ago, and it looks different now. But there are periods of time when WWE was just putting on so much better shows, and the content was much better. But we were still getting beat. We were not winning the war, but we stayed true to who we were. If it's a flash and it's exciting at first, but you can't maintain it, then it loses that pizzazz. It's a long-term duration for me. That's how you win. I've been saying it since the beginning. I'm not concerned about those numbers week to week. It's about trying to put out the best show you can every week." Now, I find these comments very interesting because Triple H still maintains the same ideology that he stated in the beginning. It is not a sprint, but it is a marathon. And I find that to be kind of concerning, and more so because WWE continues to have reduced ratings every Wednesday night. Now, to be fair, AEW is also in the same predicament. And I think what we're noticing right now between both companies, obviously pandemic aside, both of these shows are really good shows. Like, I watch AEW Dynamite and I watch NXT, and both of them feel and look different compared to Raw and SmackDown, which is honestly what this pro wrestling world needed. Now, one thing I gotta say, because I think a lot of times people actually comment on my videos saying that I'm like a WWE shill or I'm an AEW shill. I know I can't win with you guys, but you would actually be surprised to learn that I'm actually a really huge Impact Wrestling fan. And I think if Impact Wrestling was to up their production value, they would be in the conversation for creative, because AEW, Dynamite, NXT, and Impact Wrestling all have very good writing. What ends up doing very well for these shows, despite the lower ratings for both companies, or for all three companies, I should say, is the fact that these shows are still relatively good. They're relatively entertaining, and on top of that, they're relatively consistent. WWE has done a fantastic job of building up stars on NXT. The real problem is after NXT, when they go to the main roster, Vince McMahon drops the ball. That's not Triple H's fault, so we're not going to blame Triple H, and we're not going to use that against this argument of NXT versus AEW. But also, let's be very clear. AEW has done a fantastic job in such an early start to their career of actually creating stars and establishing new faces in the wrestling world. I mean, seriously, there was some news that dropped the other day that AEW signed another wrestler from the independent scene. Somebody I'm actually going to fully admit I'm not too familiar with. But they made that roster addition, and it gets me excited because I've seen what AEW has done with superstars that if you didn't watch the indies, you might not be all too familiar with. And I think that's a very impressive feature for AEW, just as it is with NXT. But when you look at the comments of Triple H, it tells me maybe he's not weak. I don't think it's a sign of weakness, despite many on social media saying that. What I think it is is Triple H knowing at this point in time, NXT may not even get close to beating AEW for the foreseeable future. And that's okay. That's okay. What we see on Wednesday nights is completely different from what we see on Mondays and Fridays. And I think that was the most important part of pro wrestling. Like, that right there truly changed the game for pro wrestling, because we saw how inconsistent Mondays and Fridays were for WWE. Now, NXT, I like to say, stands on its own 2 feet. Despite carrying the WWE umbrella, we have seen some very awesome content from WWE when it comes to the NXT brand. Again, as I said earlier, the real concern is after these superstars get moved to the main roster. That's when we start having some concerns. But when you look at NXT and AEW Wednesday night, both shows' ratings have gone down. And both of them have gone down pretty significantly. But at the end of the day, it sounds like all the television networks are still happy. It sounds like advertisers are still happy. And honestly, it sounds like fans are still happy. So what's the issue here? Well, I guess it just depends on who you ask. For Triple H, worrying about ratings really doesn't matter, because eventually, this is how things will go. At some point, AEW, which, by the way, there's a lot of pressure on AEW to deliver good content, because the minute that they slack consistently, week in and week out, if their creative is not making sense, if storylines aren't making sense, if they're pushing WWE guys all the time, these are things that people will get sick of. So deep down inside, WWE's long-term game is waiting for AEW to screw up. Now, you have to question, do you think AEW will get to the point where they screw up? I think the chances are very likely. But I think that's because pro wrestling has been around for so long that we've gotten accustomed to pretty much every kind of storyline you could think of. Babyface underdog, top heels cheating. There's just so much that we've seen in pro wrestling. It's become redundant, and it's going to happen to AEW at some point, just like it will happen to NXT. The real question here is, how can they, 1, avoid having that happen very early on in their career? And 2, how can you get around those hurdles that may come up at some point? And I think NXT and AEW are both 2 shows that can easily get over that hurdle, because they are very specific. They're a very specific niche. AEW and NXT both take advantage of the hardcore audience in pro wrestling. The real question is, can NXT or AEW win back some of the casual fans who left the world of pro wrestling 5-10 years ago? I mean, don't forget, Raw and SmackDown at some point was doing like 5 million viewers, and I think that was like 2011, 2012, maybe even a little bit after. So it's not uncommon for WWE to be very, very successful with ratings, but it's also not, I wouldn't say it's a big deal at this stage of the game, because people watch television relatively different. I, for one, during this pandemic, have actually stopped watching AEW and NXT live on the spot. I obviously keep up with it through social media, but I typically just go through my DVR, skim past the stuff that I know I absolutely won't like. And if I'm going to be real with you guys, I do it on both shows. It's not just the WWE thing. It's not just an AEW thing. Both shows aren't perfect. And I don't want to say we have to act like shows are going to be perfect, because quite honestly, they're not. You can't have a perfect wrestling show. You really can't. I think AEW has done very close. They've been very, very close several times, but ultimately at the end of the day, there's always going to be flaws. The realistic approach to this is how Triple H and Tony Khan, for their respective shows, make sure, how can they approach this to make sure that the cons don't overweigh the pros. And right now, both shows, despite having less viewership, they're still not at that point. They're both having really, really good shows, and they're both doing something different from each other. Again, I always mention this in my videos. UFC and Bellator, 2 great examples of 2 big MMA organizations that coexist. There's rumors that Bellator is going to go on CBS or Showtime, obviously ESPN Plus for the UFC. And, I see both of these companies coexist. I feel like that's what we're going to see with AEW and NXT. And I think, Triple H at this point, if he really stays true to his words and he really means what he says, then eventually, at some point, it will make sense. It will make sense to a certain point when they are beating AEW in viewership, because he can say, hey, since day one, I've been very clear that we're in this for the long term. We've been trying to get a consistent product and everything like that. And I think if that stays true and if these things actually do happen, I think WWE could be at a point where maybe they do beat AEW. But nonetheless, WWE's main goal is to make sure AEW doesn't beat Raw and SmackDown. Which, when you're attracting a hardcore audience, that's going to be pretty hard. So I want to know what you guys think. Don't forget, though, you could click that subscribe button. If you ring the bell, you'll get notified on all the content on the channel. And of course, guys, you can follow me on Twitter. If you follow me on Twitter, it's at Tango with Ango. I always let you guys know when I upload a new video. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you next time.
You have arrived at your destination.